Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. Today, I got to sit down with Victoria Myers, a period recovery specialist, registered dietitian, and the host of the Nourishing Women's Podcast. And she owns Nourishing Minds Nutrition. You can find her over on Instagram at Nourishing Minds Nutrition. And I had such an insightful conversation specifically around helping to support women with hypothalamic amenorrhea and infertility. And it was enlightening for me as a practitioner to hear, because she's the expert, right, in this field, to hear from her what are some holes, what are some gaps that were maybe missing in conventional care and even in alternative care. And one thing I really learned was just how to kind of like tweak my questioning of clients coming into FCM to make sure that we are properly screening them. I wasn't aware, I was aware how common women were misdiagnosed with PCOS when in fact it was HA. But there's a really interesting revelation that Victoria shares with us in this episode that even I was like, I never thought of it that way. Now I actually had some clients in mind that I was like, I need to go and just give a good little review of this file, make sure that I haven't potentially missed anything. So Victoria shared with us her own experience with HA and how she recovered and went on through her own fertility journey. And I think it was a really good episode to talk through body image and eating disorders and how that comes to play and comes to light in this scenario. So I do want to give a trigger warning before you hit play on this episode that we are talking about disordered eating and orthorexia. And if that is something that in this moment of your healing journey is just too triggering for you, this is an episode that I would like you to maybe come back to at another time. But it was a wonderful conversation that I think can be really enlightening for women who maybe think they're making really great choices on their fertility journey, but perhaps are taking wellness just one step too far. And I know I've definitely lived seasons of my life over the years where that was me. And I've been very fortunate that my decisions and disordered habits haven't robbed me of my cycle. But I can definitely pinpoint times through my life where I'm actually kind of shocked it didn't, in all honesty. And I appreciate Victoria coming and sharing her experience and her wisdom and her amazing success that she has with her clients here on the podcast. So like I said, you can find more about Victoria over on Instagram at Nourishing Minds Nutrition, or her website, which is just nourishingmindsnutrition.com as well. And check her out on her podcast, Nourishing Women Podcast. And I'll make sure all the links are down there in the show notes for you. Thank you for clicking play, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the Fertility Confidence Podcast, and welcome, Victoria. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Kelsey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about today's conversation.
Before we hopped on, Victoria and I were sharing, if you're watching on YouTube, the stark contrast between our offices and how we were both so complimentary.
I love it. I love the moodiness.
It's so nice. So why don't we start, Victoria, with you just sharing a little bit about you and what got you into the work that you do.
Yeah, so my name is Victoria. I own Nourishing Minds Nutrition, which is a fertility-based practice that uniquely specializes in women who have lost their periods from under-eating and over-exercising and probably have had a history of an eating disorder in their past, struggles still to this day with disordered eating and dieting. And this population just really needs a specific method to get them pregnant. And we are just so incredibly honored to provide that to our clients.
I love that. I have had a few HA clients in our practice, and it's a different type of honor, I feel like, working with women who've been diagnosed with HA, especially as they're usually, when they're coming to me, like they're already in the thick of their healing journey
Yeah.
from, if it was from disordered eating or orthorexia or what have you. And a lot of times, like one client in particular that I'm thinking of, she actually got her positive pregnancy test a couple of months ago, which was uber exciting for
That's
us.
amazing.
And yeah, she was like just in that cusp of like, her cycle had returned, but it wasn't, perfect or ideal at that point. And she just needed something a little bit more. So I so appreciate what you do for the community, because I also can find it very challenging working
Mhm.
in the HA field.
Yeah, it is really challenging. And I think something that is unique for both my personal experience, but also professional, is there's an eating disorder clinical background to my work, as well as just my own experience. I struggled myself with a decade of disordered eating. And you mentioned orthorexia, certainly had that. And I get it because I once was that person. And you're right, it's a unique skill set because you're not only doing the fertility nutrition coaching and the lifestyle and the supplementation, but you're also looking at, why do we have food guilt when we eat a carbohydrate? Why do we feel such shame when we see ourselves in the mirror? Why do we feel so much immense like fear of gaining weight, which is often needed for these clients to get pregnant? And
Mm-hmm.
it is this combination of like food and body image coaching, but also the fertility piece too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to have a conversation around what we as practitioners might be missing in this arena. So, with your clients and maybe thinking to people who have kind of like run through the gamut of all the other types of practitioners before seeing you, what are some of the bigger mistakes that mainstream medicine is making when it comes to either, maybe let's start with diagnosing HA and then we can move into what treatment looks like.
That's a great place to start because it is so common to never get a diagnosis of
Mhm.
formally with hypothalamic amenorrhea, or we'll just call it HA because that's a mouthful. I honestly would say I rarely get an actual formal diagnosis of hypothalamic amenorrhea. And that's because of a variety of things. I think lab values often present as normal with HA. If you know to look for low estrogen, low LH, low FSH, you can see HA picture clearly. Although these people can sometimes have lab values that are normal, and it makes it hard to distinguish HA, especially from something else like PCOS, which causes period loss too. We find a misdiagnosis of PCOS is really common with our client base too, because they can often present with mini follicles on their ovaries when viewed on ultrasound, because their follicles aren't developing to like maturation of like actually leading to ovulation. So it's incredibly common again to get diagnosed with PCOS, to not see it because the lab work looks quote unquote normal, or just to not ask the questions. And I think that's to me where we could probably do both conventionally and functionally a better job of just asking questions and not leading with our own thoughts of what's going on, but rather, what is your relationship with food? How would you describe it yourself? These are often people would be like, oh my God, I love eating healthy. I love eating clean. I'm on a low carb diet. I love eating lots of protein and fiber. And sometimes they'll tell you about their past with an eating disorder, but more often than not, they're going to describe themselves as like the really healthy, clean person. And certainly that's incredible. There's many aspects of that that really are positively enhancing their fertility. And if there's not enough of a balance between their energy expenditure and their adequate, like the amount of food that they're eating, their body's not going to feel safe enough to get pregnant.
Right.
So we can love that they love to take care of themselves, but it's often to me a good sign if they're like describing themselves that way. I'm immediately thinking like, what does that really mean for how much you're eating? And I know, Kelsey, you know this to be true, but how many women actually eat enough? Like, no
Very
one.
little. Yeah.
Very little. It's just so common for women to think that eating 1,200 calories, 1,500
Mhm.
calories, even 1,800 calories is enough. And they honestly see that as like a surplus, like too much, but that's nowhere near enough to properly nourish your body for fertility. So I think it's labs looking at things from a clinical picture of their history, if you know if they have had a past with an eating disorder or not. And then
Mhm.
also, more than anything, asking lots and lots of questions and getting really curious about their responses and what that may mean for how much they're actually eating, especially if we're comparing it to the amount of exercise they have, because these often tend to be people who are very, very active too, walking 10, 20, 30,000 steps a day, exercising 4 or 5, 6 times a week, sometimes 7 days a week. So we have to really compare those two things and see, is the body in a state where it feels truly unsafe to get pregnant?
Yeah, I love, there's a few like really good points you brought up there. I want to touch back on the PCOS and the mistake of that sometimes. But first, I just want to make a comment on the under eating. And I think one thing I notice with my clients a lot of times is they don't even know that they're
Yeah,
under eating. They
100%.
think that they're very much doing exceptional, and they're eating well, they're maybe following the 80-20, they're not showing us signs of disordered eating, but they just genuinely have not wrapped their head around or been educated on like, what does 1900, 2000, 2100 calories actually look like. And I even went through this with myself over the last year on a fitness journey. And I had never like tracked my macros or tracked my food before, but that was part of it. And I was like, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And I learned so much, even for myself as someone who thought they were doing a pretty good job. I knew when I was like having a bad low day, and I knew if I wasn't getting enough protein, but I was really shocked to see that I was probably only averaging on my like quote unquote good days, 16 to 1700 calories. And then in my brain, I was like, well, no wonder I'm not putting on muscle. No wonder I'm tired after my workouts, or if I'm pushing myself too hard, like I'm actually significantly underfueled for what I'm doing. I just didn't know what 2000 calories actually looked like. And I think that is a big piece for women, is it's like, well, I'm eating well and I'm eating a lot. I'm eating 3 meals and maybe a snack. Like that's what everyone says to do. But then when you actually figure out the calculations of your food and what that looks like, there's always some shock that comes back around of like, oh, hold on a second. Never mind. I have some work to do here.
So the moment you say that, I personally think to myself, I get it, how easy that would be to undereat for yourself, for our clients, myself included, because we're people who like to take care of ourselves. And it's so easy to undereat when you're eating fiber and protein and foods that really satiate you. And I do think there's often a need to just be aware, like you said, like that was completely accidental. And we see that a lot with our clients too. They're just truly accidentally under eating. But for you, Kelsey, sharing like, hey, like I was trying to gain muscle mass, you do need to be eating enough for that to be able to happen. So that makes so much sense that you really had to get clarification. And I'll even add to that conversation, if we're looking at hypothalamic amenorrhea, those are clients that truly have to be for a period of time, just temporarily in a surplus and eating way more carbohydrates and fat than they probably think they need to, just to allow that ovulation. Yeah, or they ever have. That's such a good point. Just to turn back on that ovulation switch, and then you can go back to probably what you're describing here, of like the way that you're currently eating. But there does have to be that temporary time frame where there's truly surplus, so that that body feels that safety required to turn back on the ovulation switch.
Yeah. I love how I feel like we can kind of bring in the nervous system into this conversation as well. But maybe before we go off on that tangent, let's talk about how this gets mistaken for PCOS. Because I can hear listeners going, well, I've been diagnosed with PCOS and I still don't have a period. So how do I know if it's actually hypothalamic amenorrhea and not PCOS?
Such a good question. And again, like I mentioned earlier, so common, like more often than not, there's a misdiagnosis of PCOS, at least somewhere along the way for the client in their period loss journey. In fact, I just had a client the other day sign on who has like a significant eating disorder history and just slapped with a PCOS diagnosis, no questions, no one even tying the knots together of like, hey, like you've had an eating disorder that is significant here, multiple rounds of residential treatment. Of course, you have period loss from HA. So the ways that you can distinguish it, lab values are going to be incredibly helpful here. With PCOS, we're typically presenting with high LH, especially in comparison to FSH, high androgens like testosterone. We're going to have typically low estrogen, where in comparison with hypothalamic amenorrhea, there's very low levels of estrogen, low levels of LH, low levels of FSH, and low levels of androgens too. With your ultrasound, both can present with mini follicles when viewed through ultrasound. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Typically with PCOS, you want 25 or more follicles or the pearl-like presentation. So that is a way you can distinguish those two. And then again, just asking questions and asking for clarification on how much they're eating, how much they're exercising, what their stress levels are like, what their past is like, and that can help give you the full clinical picture of whether it's HA and PCOS. Technically speaking, too, you can have both, but if that does happen, you want to treat the HA first and then come back to the PCOS. And with PCOS, I would argue it's still important to properly nourish your body for fertility. But the way we do that and the way that we include blood sugar regulation is going to be just slightly different. So again, sometimes there's a combination of both. And this is where I'm sure Kelsey would agree, working with someone who understands this and understands the conditions and the differentiation between the two, or even like the complexity of having both, that's where that really comes into play.
I also did not even think about how ultrasound presentation could be the same. Like my brain kind of goes to HA. There's likely not a lot of action.
And that does happen
in there.
sometimes. Yeah, but sometimes it's the exact opposite.
The same.
And same with AMH. Sometimes HA,
Yeah.
especially if it's an extreme HA case, they're going to usually have a really low AMH too. But if they are a more mild case of HA, they can often have, because they have many follicles, they can have these elevated AMHs, which is again where it gets really confusing. But the history, the like current eating and exercise habits, where that part comes into play here too. And just really getting a better understanding of the client, what's going on. I think what adds to the complexity here too is that there's a spectrum. Sometimes with hypothalamic amenorrhea, you can have the true diagnosed version of it with the very low lab values, the no period for months or years even. But there's also the people who have short luteal phases, who have long follicular phases, who are having anovulatory bleeds. We consider these within the spectrum of HA too.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's take it back to kind of supports and treatment. So where are we as practitioners going wrong when it comes to supporting women with this diagnosis?
Yeah. So I would say more than anything, having an understanding of eating disorders and just knowing what to look for. If your client feels like they have to earn food through exercise, if they feel immense guilt from eating a food like a carbohydrate, even if it's a sweet potato, they feel guilt from eating that, that's something to think about. If they have intense fear of gaining weight, like ding, 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 you want to ask exploratory questions there as to why that is. I think conventional doctors, it is really tough because they have no training in amenorrhea, but also they have no training in eating disorders. Functional practitioners like yourself, Kelsey, I think y'all do such an incredible job of because you're working so much more one-on-one with clients, you get that clinical picture so much better and you're getting more time with the patients to ask these questions. But from a clinical, if you're talking about a conventional doctor, it just is really hard because they're often just being told, do medications, do IUI, or more often than not, hey, you have to do IVF because those lower treatments for fertility are often not even going to work for you if your body's in such a state of survival. So that piece is kind of tough. If they had time to ask questions and they had the full clinical picture, I think we could do a lot more. And there are certainly doctors that are working to fix that in the industry, but that one's tough.
Yeah, it's so hard. I think the time has always been, the time you got to spend with patients is why I went into this style of medicine, because my journey and through growing up, I always knew we can't really get better in this scenario. And I live in Ontario, so things are a little bit different here, but there just isn't enough time. And so when I found naturopathic medicine and I was like, oh, look, I get to choose how long I get to talk to my patients and, how much I want to see them and what that looks like. That was such a big deciding factor for me that we need options to do better. And I think, everyone that listens to the podcast has heard me say from a fertility perspective, we need a care team. So it's not that there isn't benefit to conventional care or an opportunity or an area arising where you maybe do need medication support to help you. But I think one of the things that Victoria is really sharing that we can kind of loop this in a bow is, yes, maybe the medications are in your future, but if your body is not in a state of receptivity, then those medications aren't even going to be able to do their job. And that's where the conventional model is failing, essentially, is by jumping into the letrozole, the Clomid, to try to get you to ovulate. But especially when HA is there and hormone levels are low, what's your lining going to look like in that scenario? Like, is there even proper blood flow? Are your follicles even going to be able to respond? We're skipping steps, unfortunately.
We are skipping steps. And I think when I hear you say this, like, it's a win-win to do period recovery work no matter what. Because if you do have to go the medication route, even the IVF route, we know that when a body is properly nourished and it feels safe, your body's going to respond so much better to those treatments. But I will also say, it takes months for those to work, sometimes even years. If a client can give us around 6 months, we can usually get their periods back in under 90 days. It's relatively quick if you follow a customized protocol. We're really good at this. It's just what we do, and then from there, going on to get pregnant within about 1 to 6 months from getting your period back. So we're looking at like a 6 to 9 month timeline. That's very realistic if someone is ready to truly properly nourish their body for fertility and really look at, for them, their root cause of their period loss, which is the undereating, the overexercising at play.
Yeah. How long, or not how long, do you find with your clients, is it common or quote unquote normal for through the recovery process to kind of watch the cycle return and stay long and irregular and get better? Or do you find in those 90 days that their body just sort of turns on and knows what's up?
Yeah, so I usually see 3 things happen. I will say we can get a first recovery period back in 90 days or less. Our average is actually more like 6 to 10 weeks. Of course, there's the outliers that take about a month, and the outliers that can take up to 4 months, but it really can be a relatively quick and easy process by giving your body the surplus, by giving your body the rest, if you can do that work, which is why often food and body image coaching is needed throughout that process of doing that. So from there, we'll see 3 things happening. A person's client go immediately to a regular cycle, ovulating between days 12 to 18, having a regular-ish cycle. From there, sometimes we see number 2, long follicular phases, which to us just signals the need for continued recovery. Right. Or number 3, that they have a luteal phase defect, those short luteal phases, and that's typically a low progesterone. And again, continued time in recovery typically resolves this, although we also look at nutrient-dense foods. We're also looking at minerals. We do HMA tests for our clients. So we are looking at really the whole nutrition picture, but continued time in recovery for our clients in this specific population of hypothalamic amenorrhea truly gives their body everything that it needs, with those additional things added in just to bump up the timeline a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that timeline you just gave, even if we looked at the full kind of fertility option too, of pulling in that next 1 to 6 months after, it feels hopeful to me, because I think of clients who are looking for support, kind of coming out of their disordered eating and way of thinking, and are ready to take the steps and are feeling ready in their recovery. It can feel like this is going to take years to fix. And, I think it's amazing what you're doing with your clients, that you're seeing such quick results. And the good news is, with HA and putting in the work to get you ovulating and get your period back, and all the amazing work you can do with food and lifestyle, the trickle down effect that has to your overall fertility potential, regardless of the ovulation aspect, is huge, because you're also going to be improving your egg quality and 100%. Lowering your inflammation and all these other amazing things. And if you have your partner, on board with how you're eating and living, it's going to help their sperm quality as well. So even though it feels like you're maybe stuck in this phase of, I have to fix this first so that I can get pregnant, you're doing a lot of great preconception care through recovery as well, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's important to, yes, eat in a surplus and eat enough carbohydrates and fat, as I mentioned earlier, but we still want to be eating those nutrient-dense foods that are fertility friendly. We want to be eating more minerals and supplementation and lifestyle. We also do, semen analysis with our clients too, if their husbands want to do that in addition to their, the wife doing the period recovery work. So yes, it's kind of cool because it does kind of like, again, it's a win-win in so many ways, whether you go the IVF route, whether you go the natural route, whether your body just needs that preconception time. Healing your body by giving it the safety it needs through adequate rest, through proper nourishment. There truly is like no loss that can happen other than having to cope with the weight gain. That's the likelihood for HA clients specifically. And that is where I think the HA work is just so incredibly unique, because for other clients, weight gain is likely, you'll have to tell me if this is true on you. And I doubt that's something you often have to deal with, where for our clients, it's almost inevitable for everybody that they're going to have to navigate these uncomfortable feelings of weight gain.
Yeah. And where the coaching and the mindset work obviously becomes crucial, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I don't know that you can do it without that, because for these people, that's the very reason why they're struggling with period loss and infertility in the first place.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. Let's talk about the nervous system a little bit, because whenever I think of under eating, like, yes, there's all these physical aspects, but my brain immediately links under eating with stress. I think it's one of the biggest aspects of stress most women who struggle with infertility are going through, on top of their fertility stress, of course, because like we said in the beginning, a lot of women don't know that they're under eating. And when we talk about stress, we think about our jobs or our home life or our finances or our fertility journey. We think about what I kind of call in our bubble, like our environmental stresses, what's sort of coming at us from the outside, but we don't necessarily think about how under eating is a stress. Overeating, not great foods can also be a stress on the body. Not getting enough sleep can be a stress on the body. Over exercising is a stress on the body. And these things all kind of lump in that HA camp as well. So how important do you find just general nervous system regulation and mindset work? How important is that for the HA client?
It's everything, because like you just mentioned, there's all these environmental stressors going on for the person, their day-to-day stress, their work stress, their financial stress, their fertility stress, the pollutants, all the things that are in the environment. And then you add on top of that a body that's undernourished, that's been living for years and years on 1,500 calories a day, a body that's been exercised 6 days a week, walking so many steps per day, and then constant thoughts of your body, your weight gain, fear of your body changing, constant thoughts of food guilt, constant thoughts of thinking that you need to earn food, wondering if you can go to the restaurant and find something to eat, feeling stressed if you eat something that's not on your plan. It is overwhelming. What we find when we do polls with our clients is often 95% of their thoughts are fixated on food, exercise, and their body. So can you imagine like that stress of already what exists for any person struggling with infertility, and then to add on top of that all these other stressors that are more emotional and mental. So to speak to the nervous system, without question, that their nervous systems are dysregulated. And we certainly see that to be true with their HTMA test. We can see that within those tests, and that tells us a lot about their nervous system picture. And that's really the way we look at nervous system, is like, let's get your body properly nourished through minerals, but also just adequate intake and giving it the rest it needs. Similar to the way I described earlier, where your body needs the calorie surplus just for this temporary time frame, your body also needs like the exact opposite of everybody else in the fertility space. You need a rest. You need to exercise less. Doesn't mean no exercise at all. We never tell people no exercise, but we need more gentle, modified exercise and less overall. And just to give yourself the permission to watch Netflix, to read a book, to take a nap. These are people who really struggle with these things. You mentioned sleep earlier, and I immediately think, oh gosh, these are people who are waking up at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning to do their workouts, often a HIIT style, or running 10, 15 miles before they go to work for the day. Their nervous system is so dysregulated, and we really have to look at that at the full picture of their fertility. And then finally, I'll also add, when you feel extreme distress in your body, that also causes a lot of nervous system dysregulation. So again, to add in consistently this body image concept of like, when there's high distress in your body and how you feel about your body, that's also going to dysregulate your nervous system too.
Yeah. It sounds to me like therapy is not a bad idea.
Yes, we always recommend therapy, and the way we kind of look at our work is it's like food and body image therapy. We
Yeah.
are extremely thoughtful to stay within our own lanes of not doing therapeutic work that especially involves bringing up traumas, but
Yeah.
it is basically like therapy talking through food and body image, as well as truly reframing your perspective on what fertility means from like, I need to nourish my body. It deserves to get the care it needs to be taken care of so that I can meet my ultimate goal of holding a baby in my arms.
Yeah, I love that. How, for someone who's maybe listening to this and feeling kind of emotional as this maybe being the first place they're acknowledging their body image struggles, like what
Mhm.
would you say to them? How could you help them feel comfortable to reach out for support?
I would say to that person, I see you, I get you because I once was you. I struggled my entire life with my relationship with my body. And I always thought that my body was a problem, that it needed to be fixed. And in this process of deciding I needed to heal my relationship with food in order to get my period back, I experienced amenorrhea myself. It really transformed my relationship with body into something that's like a companion, a partner in my life. We only have one body. We will live in this body our entire lives. So why not create a partnership, a friendship with your body? And in doing so, you'll find your fertility is supported every step of the way. So like, I get you, I see you, but I promise there's life on the other side of recovery.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's such a like it's such a hard path to walk down, but once you make the decision and you find the right support, there's so many beautiful things on the other side, not just your dream family, but your health back, right?
Mhm.
And in a way that doesn't feel obsessive. Like I love that you bring up and you pulled your community around just the sheer amount of intrusive thoughts that you
Yeah.
can get about your body and the way that you eat and the way that you move. And we talk a lot about mental load for women, especially in the
Mhm.
fertility game, and how, on top of all the other aspects of mental load that women carry in the household and in the family, to then
Mhm.
add this aspect of how you're viewing yourself and speaking to yourself on top of that. If there's ever, a ball that we can set down, my hope is that everyone can acknowledge that it's this one, right? And we
Mhm.
work to change our relationship with our body and with food in a way that promotes fertility. Because I love how you mentioned questioning our couples who speak about very healthy eating in a way to just open up that conversation, because I see this in the fertility community as well, of women reading this, that, and the other thing of like, okay, well, now I can't eat that. And now I can't eat this. And now I shouldn't eat that. And they often come to work with us with food fear they've never had before
Mhm.
and with significantly lower caloric intakes because they're trying to follow every single fertility recommendation out there. And so these women, aren't experiencing HA in this moment, but I'm sure if this carried on for years, that would likely end up developing and be the case. And they're just trying to make healthy decisions.
Yeah, it's the irony, isn't it? Or
Yeah.
the challenge in this work is like, how do we empower our clients to see that caring for their bodies and eating these fertility friendly foods and eating this fertility friendly lifestyle is of such importance. There's so much we can do from nutrition, supplementation, and lifestyle to support our fertility. And if we are eliminating every food group out there, especially for this subset of clients, it's actually the exact opposite of what they
Yeah.
need. This might sound controversial, but I would almost rather someone eat crappy food and actually eat enough than truly undernourish their bodies and only be eating, a few fruits and vegetables a day and calling that enough
Yeah.
food. Of course, I obviously am a dietitian. I care about nutrition and I care about the fertility focus of foods, but at the same time, adequate intake, especially for these people, matters more than anything else.
Yeah. I've definitely had this conversation with clients before where they're like so fearful. They're traveling. They're like, what am I going to do in this moment? And like, you are
Live your
just
life.
going to eat. You are
Yes.
going to eat whatever you can. I don't care. I don't care what it is.
I'm so
I
grateful
don't
to hear that.
care.
You're like, just eat,
Just,
please.
I don't care if it's coming in a little brown bag. I don't care. Like, pack things that you can. But if, we're in a position where that's the only option, you always eat.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. And we just can let that guilt go because it's better to eat. And do we want to eat like that 100% of the time? No. But your one-off situations of being like, oh shoot, I have nothing else. I have to grab that, or I have to eat that because I haven't eaten in 6 hours and I have no other choice. Like the option is always, the better choice is always to eat the food.
To eat the food. Yeah, we have a stake in our community called Wellness Without Obsession. And it's exactly what you're articulating here. Like, yes, wellness matters. We care about our health habits.
Yeah.
And if it's done with this dogma and this rigidity and this obsession, it's not healthy. And in fact, like, not eating at all is way worse than just eating the dang food, and knowing that sometimes life presents obstacles to us. And like, you just have to work with what you got. It's okay to not always eat perfectly. And in fact, if you can't not eat perfectly, that's something to reflect on.
I love that idea of like, if wellness is so rigid, like, is it even wellness anymore? Like,
It's a
have
great
we
question.
crossed the
Yeah.
line at that
Yeah.
point that we maybe then need to reevaluate what our opinion of wellness actually is?
Exactly. Because then if it's that obsessive, we're not having a regulated nervous system. We're not having a body that feels safe and supported. It's honestly doing the exact opposite of the whole reason why you're researching and learning about fertility in the first place.
Yeah, I love that. So many like aha moments for me. So hopefully all of you listening feel the same. But Victoria, I feel like I've learned a lot, and I think this is just a really informative conversation for women, especially women who this might be a new avenue that they're going to walk down. So I really appreciate you being here and hanging out with us. To wrap up, I always ask our podcast guests, what is one piece of advice that you'd love to leave for someone listening that's maybe on an HA infertility journey?
Okay, this is going to sound different. I don't know how your other guests answer this, but my advice would be to switch your morning routine from waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning and doing a HIIT style workout and drinking black coffee and having a protein bar or a banana and calling that breakfast. Let's talking to nervous system regulation. Let's have a regulated morning routine. Let's wake up a little bit later. Let's have a calm morning, breakfast before coffee. Let's truly nourish our bodies. And then we can still enjoy our coffee, but doing so after breakfast. Journaling, reading, really starting your day off grounded and centered in yourself is going to help you throughout every moment in your day with all these stressors in mind that you're experiencing that are so understandable. But if you can make that one small, simple shift, you're going to notice such a dramatic difference in how you feel, from food to body image to stress to everything in life.
Yeah, I love that. I laugh because I love like the banana for breakfast just so reminds me of my mom. That's like totally her thing. And my husband's parents too. They're like, we started eating breakfast, Kelsey, look. And they'll like send me a picture of their like fruit bowl and their pot of coffee. I'm like, okay, guys, like,
Yes.
sweet.
Or even worse, I mean, how many times, I can think of my grandmother as a great example of this. Every time I see her, she's like, I haven't eaten yet today. And every time I'm like, oh, geez, like, no,
do you
wrong
not
idea
listen to
here.
my podcast? Let me send you some episodes, Grandma. No, you know what? I had a client, we were talking last week actually, and I asked her, I was like, what does food look like for you through the day? Throw me like an average day of what food looks like for you. And she's like, yeah, I eat really healthy. And like, we have the same breakfast every day, one piece of wheat toast and one egg. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, but that's not enough. So how could we keep your like common breakfast that your whole family has, agreed to, and it's easy for you, but just make it a little bit better? And I explained to her, I was like, one egg is actually only 6 grams of protein, and an egg and a piece of toast, you're getting like maybe 200 calories in the morning. Like, we're already starting way too low, and then you're playing catch up the rest of the day. So focusing on like, how do we improve? Let's just start here with just this one meal and get a little bit more to start the day. the rest of your day is going to just naturally kind of follow suit with your appetite and things. You're going to have bad days. We all have bad days where it's just busy and things happen and we're not pre-planned well enough. But I find for our clients, if we can get their morning, like you're saying, like I love that tip, because if we can get their mornings started off a little bit better with better food choices, but also just better lifestyle choices with the time that they have, then we see a trickle down effect into just how the rest of their day and their energy goes.
I love that you're giving that advice. And speaking to energy, I mean, they're going to feel so much better from eating more than just a piece of toast and one egg. Like you mentioned, that's not nearly enough protein, let alone the other macros too.
Yeah. Yeah. My children, bless them, they don't eat lunch at school, either of them. I don't know why. It's like their own weird little thing. So we eat like our whole street laughs at us when we explain, like we tell them like what we had to eat this morning, because the four of us sit down to like a full, huge gourmet meal every day because we have to, because we know we're shipping them off for 6 hours where they might eat like a couple of crackers and not much else, unfortunately. Maybe hopefully in the future they grow out of whatever this weird phase is. So yeah, our friends on our street are always laughing. They're like, what'd you have for breakfast? And the kids are like, oh, we had like 3 eggs and turkey sausage. And they like go down the list of all the food we shove into them before we send them out. And then they come home from school and they basically like eat for 4 hours after. But this is not how we want to eat, ladies. We want to eat like regularly timed. But my mention of it was to say, you know, our breakfast when Tyler and I were solo and we didn't have the kids, or when they were babies, like we would eat every morning, but it wouldn't be like a huge, you know, 400 or 500 calorie, 30 gram protein meal. And sometimes like Tyler just ate cereal pretty much for years and years and years until we started doing this of like, well, no, the kids need more than that before they go to school. And now that's how we start our day. And if we are traveling or something's going on that we don't start our day like that, we notice for sure. Like the rest of the day is just a mess usually.
I think you're giving us all inspiration here, Kelsey. I'm like, I had the hardest time getting my family to eat breakfast with me. So maybe I just need to like force them to sit down with me. This is a great, again, inspiration for me.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, it's our little routine, our little morning routine. Doesn't mean we need more time in the morning, absolutely, but like
it's worth it.
It works and it's worth it, and we get to start our day nourished and well. And then we send our little ones out into the world to swallow air for the next I don't know how they survive, honestly, but they do. And
surprise you like that every time.
Yeah. So maybe this is, you know, a change that some of you guys listening can make in your family. Make it a family event, even if it's just you and your partner, because they also need to sit down and eat breakfast in the morning as well.
They also need to properly nourish their body for fertility. And I bet it's going to look a little different for them, but they still need to do it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Victoria. How can couples find you and find more information on how to work together with you?
Yes, the easiest way to find us is on Instagram. We're really active there, and it's at Nourishing Minds Nutrition. Our website is also the same, nourishingmindsnutrition.com. Finally, we have a podcast that we'd love for you to listen to. It's called the Nourishing Women Podcast.
Amazing. I'll make sure all of that is linked in the show notes, and hopefully we can chat again soon.
Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.